Thank you to everyone for joining us today for today's webinar. We're going to be speaking about using analyst relations to accelerate sales. I am a analyst relations executive at CCgroup, and we'll be joined today by Duncan Chappell, who I'm sure will introduce in due course. Just a few housekeeping rules to go over before we start. So it is a webinar. All attendees to this webinar are muted, and this webinar will be recorded. So if you would like it after, you are more than welcome to. And we will have a Q&A throughout the presentation. So if you do want to send in your questions via the chat button at the bottom, and then once we get to the colorful slides, as you'll see throughout the webinar, we can stop and look at the questions that we have today. So yeah, like I said, my name is Pedro. I'm a cybersecurity AR executive, and today we're joined by Duncan, the head of analyst relations. Duncan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so obviously Pedro and I work in the analyst relations team at CCgroup. So I spend most of my time working with companies that are trying to do better out of analyst relations. Just as a reminder, if you have comments or questions, put those into the chat. I saw somebody raise their hand, but we're not going to be opening up the microphone during the webinar. It's like a relentless monologue by me. I'm sorry. Pedro will try and interrupt me with your questions and colleagues from time to time. As Pedro mentioned, we've got these kind of big section header slides. These slides are a great opportunity for you to throw in questions and comments. Just to set the scene a little bit, analyst relations isn't very good at enabling sales, sadly. I mean, it sounds straightforward. It sounds like it should work. A few people have really got it working well, but as a rule of thumb, the promise is not really realized. What I'm going to be doing today is kind of talking about the opportunity, why it should work, stepping through some of the reasons why it's not really working out for many people. And then from a position of great modesty and some humbleness, I want to share some of the experiences that I've seen work, talk about the sweet spot that we found ourselves in at CCgroup. I definitely can't pretend that we have the last word. You know, I'm pretty sure the state of the art in analyst relations is going to be found, I don't know, in Amazon or somewhere like that. But definitely there's a lot of experience and insight that we're bringing to bear here. And I have forgotten to put in that compulsory bragging slide about CCgroup and what it does. But just for context, obviously we're known for analyst relations and media relations. We also have a marketing group. And one of the things that gives us is a lot of expertise, a lot of experience from working with colleagues, trying to help them to accelerate traffic that can drive lead generation or that can push existing leads through the sales pipeline more quickly. And so in this and in other webinars, we're kind of drawing out on some of that experience. I want to start off by giving, like a happy story. I mean, it's a relatively modest one, but it's one of ours, and it gives a sense of what is possible. Signicat is one of our clients on the financial technology side. They are a leader in using electronic identities to help companies to be able to onboard people and to validate identities more quickly. One of the challenges that they have, I mean, that you have, everyone has, right, is more marketing qualified leads, trying to get more leads. And they had a strategic orientation to Northern Europe, still do. And they've got a lot of content of their own, really good content, but actually they weren't necessarily very good at using all of this content that is generated as a result of all this wonderful analyst relations activity that we're all engaging in. So we worked on a really straightforward activity. We commissioned an analyst firm to do a webinar together with Signicat We got 500 people registered for the webinar on the back of content that the analyst firm had generated. We had 180 people generated lead, 180 people attended live. We had 200 marketing qualified leads, 100 sales qualified leads. It led them to a really successful exposure to a new business and to an acquisition. So a happy stories. There are happy stories everywhere. That's just one that we want to share. And if you think about it, it kind of sounds like it should be straightforward. That this is a model. People who know Carter Lusher, who used to be at Hewlett Packard and then at Sage Circle and then Informatica, developed this model. I'm not doing it to pick on anyone, but generally, I think what we think of as being analyst relations is a relatively straightforward activity. First off, we try to shape market perception. We're shaping market perception by trying to shift what analysts think and say and do. And then by doing that, we get analysts to talk about our companies more favorably, that they either talk about them in their research or they recommend them orally, and then that generates leads. Sometimes they'll generate criticisms of us rather than positive recommendations. So then we need to respond critically to analysts when they don't feel love for us. And then as a result, we get those leads coming through, which are positive. We're able to dampen the impact of negative comment, which helps us as well. And then in the process, we're able to feed leads and feed content through to the sales team, and that helps us to close business. So it really sounds super straightforward, doesn't it? And why are we having a problem with it? It also should work because of that kind of food cycle. I mean, you know about the food cycle. Pollen gets eaten by bees, and bees get eaten by hummingbirds, and hummingbirds maybe they don't really get eaten by hummingbirds, but you know what I mean. They get eaten by eagles, and eagles get eaten by wolves, and wolves get eaten by, I don't know, whatever. But there's that notion that you have ideas that come out of thought leaders like industry analysts, and these ideas come from thought leaders, and they're consumed and amplified by others. Ideas from analysts, they go into the B2B sales channel, they go into the media, they go into regulators, they go into management consultancies, they go into sourcing advisors. They're amplified in the industry, they're amplified again by the media, not just by analysts being interviewed by the media, but all of these people who are suddenly on the same wavelength as the analysts get repeated by the media, and then it goes out into the market. These ideas get tested in the market. Analysts are interacting with the market more than anybody else, and then they refine their ideas. And so if we are able to have a positive impact anywhere in this cycle on the conversation, then we're shifting what analysts and other thought leaders do. And a key to that is shifting the output of analysts. It's fundamental in the perspective of, in the opinion of analyst relations people. If analyst relations is going to be enabling sales, we're going to be doing that by winning positive recommendations, oral recommendations, word of mouth recommendations, and shifting reports. So if we're able to get those positive mentions, we are going to be accelerating what is happening for us with this analyst content. And this analyst content goes everywhere. So this is a very old diagram. I like it despite its age. Forrester's social technographics ladder. There are ideas that are created by thought leaders. They push down through conversationalists, critics. They push out through the market. In other webinars that we've done, we've spoken about CCgroup's catalyst reports. So these are for each of the vertical market streams that CCgroup is organized in. They get a budget to commission independent market research companies to go out and understand what content is used in the IT decision-making cycle. What we've seen is analyst contents are decisive third-party content, certainly in the handfuls of analyst forms that are most used at the beginning of the buying process, building up strategy, building up requirements, and so on. And then as that sales process narrows and comes towards the decision-making pointy end of the sales funnel, analyst reports are the most impactful, the most decisive content in changing what buyers do when they come to select a shortlist from the long list and then a winner from the shortlist. So analysts are incredibly powerful thought leaders, the decisive thought leaders. And so if we're doing analyst relations correctly, even without any particular attention towards the specifics of sales enablement, if we're doing analyst relations effectively, then sales should be leveraging the benefits directly through being able to consume the insights of analysts and through customers and channel partners consuming analyst insights. So these insights, the recommendations, the positive reports, going out into the market, if analyst relations is hitting its goals of just reaching out to analysts, communicating with them, not doing anything dangerous, we should be seeing these positive results. Yeah, we should be amplifying the authority and the audience of positive analysts. You know, through our own activities, we're going to be growing the audience of positive analysts. We'll be retweeting them, sharing them, citing them in our press releases, bringing them along to our events. And by building better relationships with industry analysts, we're giving them more insight and we're helping them to be more successful. We're spending more time with the analysts who are positive towards us than we are with the analysts who are negative about us. We're giving them more insights, so their insights are becoming wiser and more valuable. So we should simply be amplifying the authority and the audience for positive analysts. Then, hopefully, we are supporting marketing and corporate communications. So we're spotting this analyst comment, we're feeding it through, even if it's just clippings, we're feeding it through into the business. We're in the process of building analyst relations programs, commissioning or supplying to analysts reference customers and helping our organization to source positive reviews. And we're creating all of this content, using all of this content that can either go through content that's been approved by analyst firms or can supplement content that's been approved by analyst firms. And then we are enabling business development. We're helping sales to close deals because we give them more information. We're supporting lead creation because all of this analyst content and recommendation is driving market awareness and building favorability for us. And then it should be feeding through into the sales pipeline. So, you know, algebraically, it really sounds like it should work pretty easily, doesn't it? There's one way in particular that we at CCgroup talk about this a lot, which is we talk about leveraging outputs. And this is, I can't pretend that this is a major part of sales enablement, but it certainly does seem to be the sweet spot in many of the conversations, the pain point that many of our clients seem to want help with. So what we're doing there is we're collating content. So when we see analyst comment, either if we're hearing analyst comment in conversations, in briefings, in other interactions, or if we're reading it in analyst content, we're tracking that, mapping it to the marketing goals of you, of other clients, prioritizing the comments that we see to be most interesting. Particularly, we're spotlighting things that are about the market, the go-to-market, the customers that seem to be the biggest opportunity, the attributes of the solutions and offers that are most important, and thoughts about corporate strategy. You know, what do analysts believe are the critical capabilities, the key features of firms that are going to be successful? We pour all of this into an inventory, which we refresh and update and build. That allows our clients to have a repository of things that can be amplified. You know, if you spot this content, you can summarize it, you can retweet it, you can write things about it on LinkedIn, on your blog. You can generate hooks that point to it. You can generate your own short content referencing analyst content, and then that can be given to social media programs, to direct mail programs. It can go out to the audience that matters to you, and then you can track that diffusion. So it's hard for you to see the way that the analyst content is moving, because you don't own that content unless you buy reprints. You will never own most of it, but you can track what you are saying about it and content that you are sharing that is pointing web traffic towards that content online. And then our goal is in that process to accelerate the sales cycle. Yeah. Very often leads move slowly through the sales cycle. Something that we've seen during the COVID period is that in some vertical markets, cybersecurity, say, buying dramatically accelerated, but there are other sales markets where sales have slowed down and where analyst content can be a fantastic tool to help kind of chivvy buyers along, to give them more to engage, to help salespeople to identify people in the sales pipeline who are maybe a little bit more engaged than others, who might benefit or be more responsive to proactive sales outreach, and generally to increase awareness of our solution, increase confidence in the need to fix the business problems, to increase the way that any enhanced analyst support is felt by a market that we're looking at. So it should work, but actually it's a really big challenge. We're going to pause now to look at questions and comments and just see if there's anything that we can help with.
There is one question, Duncan, in the Q&A section
about the webinar. How did we find the audience in the first place? In two ways, actually. So we were really lucky, actually, that we were able to get part of the analyst firm's webinar. So part of the deal that we made with the analyst firm, we and the client made the provision to host the webinar, so that then we would get the registrations. But the analyst firm informed people about the event, and then also the CCgroup also had their own, of course, has their own direct mail account. And then we used other outreach, basically classic content marketing. Nothing very successful there. But what was nice about it was because we owned the registration form, we got all of those 500 contacts, not just 180 who turned up. And then we were able to reach out, or they were able to reach out in different ways to turn those from marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads. Thanks for the question. Thank you. Okay, so it sounds simple. Yeah, it sounds like it should happen. I mean, it doesn't sound easy. Definitely sounds like hard work, but it sounds like it should be happening as a normal organic part of analyst relations, even without any special effort. Analyst relations done well should be generating leads. In fact, all marketing communications done well should be generating leads and accelerating the sales pipeline. Yeah, it is, as Kevin Lucas at Forrester Research says, it is the most intractable problem for analyst relations professionals. The lived reality is a little bit more like this. This picture is a homage to my colleague Duncan McKean. He's a volunteer lifeboat person, and will be on our webinar next month, by the way. I've got more about that later on. But a typical situation of analyst relations interacting with sales is in an emergency. Yeah, very typically. If AR and sales are interacting, they're interacting for the very first time, and it's about a problem. So that's horrible. It's a really difficult situation for us. We never want to be on our back foot. We never want to be responsive. But very often it's a fire drill where people are coming in from the sales team and saying, I'm losing a deal because of this. I've encountered this hostile report. Why didn't you prepare me for this? I've got this massive opportunity. What can I do? These are the sorts of things that are typically where we're at. Yeah, these are typically the starting points for analyst relations people, and I think it's modest. It's a vast understatement to say that responses vary. Yeah, very often the trust isn't there between AR and sales. The good salesperson has often learned to not introduce any variables into the deal that they don't completely control. And very often there's no tracking. Yeah. So one of my clients was in a very happy situation now where they'd sold a lead to a new client. It was like $4.5 million. They tracked the lead back through their CRM system, and the lead had come in from an analyst report, actually from a niche analyst firm. So that was lovely. You know, from this one report, £4.5 million. I was at a webinar. No, I organised a conference, the Analyst Relations Forum at King's College London several years ago, where we had a presentation from Sapient, Sapient Razorfish, and they were talking about like 180 analyst affected deals that they had traced through their sales pipeline that year. So some organizations at a mass scale or even at a very modest scale are able to track leads that are coming in that have been affected by analysts or have come from analyst content through to their sales pipeline. I think it's really fair to say that very often there is no tracking like that. They're often not identifying leads that come in. They're not differentiating the outcomes between analyst affected leads and analysts that have not been touched by analyst content. Very often AR teams are receiving leads from analysts, but they don't really know what to do with them. What I've certainly seen is very often AR teams will pass leads over and the sales teams won't really know what to do with them, or they may not have confidence that they are very effective leads. And definitely one of the easiest ways to build rapport between analyst relations teams and salespeople is by getting analysts into the sales education process, into the onboarding process for salespeople, and that is very often not done. Yeah. I'm going to go on. I can see some questions coming in, but I'm going to go through to my interstitial slide and then I'll come back to the questions. So yeah, more often the relationship between AR and sales is either absent or it's mistrustful. Yeah, salespeople think there's like a really big signal to noise ratio with AR. AR is like it's like complaining all the time. It's saying lots of things. It's producing a lot of content. There's this habit that we have, definitely we have here at CCgroup. I'm not going to say we're innocent of this crime, but I think very often we're listening to analysts, we're hearing what they're saying, and we think, oh, this sounds really interesting. Oh, I must note this down and send it over. And there's this process where we're kind of like picking up analyst content and handing it over, but then maybe we may not be wrapping it up in the best way. Very often, sales will see imperfect analyst evaluations. You know that this analyst has not said that our solution is the best thing in the world on all occasions for everybody, which is obviously terrible and shows that they can't be trusted. And often lost deals will be attributed to analysts. You know, there's this figure of speech, isn't there, that success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. Yeah, nobody claims responsibilities for failures. People blame failures on other factors. There are no honest defeats, but lost deals are very often attributed to analyst content. And sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not all of the picture. And then AR also has a very uneven experience of working with sales. Sales get in touch when they want last minute support, or they want a huge amount of effort very, very late. It seems very tactical. AR people can find salespeople being very kind of arrogant, dismissive of the effort that AR people are put in. And of course, AR and sales are disconnected, and that's definitely a big reality in almost all settings. And there are some reasons there that in most organizations, AR isn't set up to make the most of AR, and sales isn't set up to make the most of AR. AR isn't set up to make the most of sales. So there's a disconnection. You know, it's like if I only meet my neighbors when there's a problem with a leaking roof or a falling down wall or something. You don't want to start working in a situation where you've got extreme need. And there are a few interconnected problems that make this a very potent and problematic bottleneck. I've got these 3 blocks arranged in a linear order. I mean, it's not really, I'm not sure if it's really fair this way to describe it this way, but one of the big problems is that sales doesn't really value analysts. Yeah, salespeople, as I said, they're very cautious. They don't introduce a variable into a sale unless they can possibly avoid it. That means that they want to not refer to analyst content unless they can possibly avoid it, not bring analysts into deals. They may not know of the most supportive analysts because they may be at small firms. The number of positive analysts may be very small. Credible analysts might not be involved by sales into the deal. That means that the company thinks the only way it can leverage analysts is by doing reprints. I'm a big fan of reprints. I think reprints are amazing value for money. Obviously, buying a reprint of a positive analyst report is like buying a gym membership. Yeah, I bought a gym membership. I'm not really going there very often. Me buying the gym membership is not the problem here, right? I'm the problem. I'm not going to the gym as often as I should do. So buying reprints work. Yeah, if you put reprints to work, then they will work for you. If you just buy them, nothing is going to happen. But people think that reprints are the only way of using analyst content. That means that they are spending money on reprint fees rather than investing on making those insights usable or building relationships with other analysts. They're not doing anything to amplify the analyst comment. And then AR isn't really being valued as a partner in the sales process. And because of that, AR can't play its role as enabling sales. AR is seen as a cost, not as a profit center. So this means that people think that people aren't engaging with analysts. So many salespeople think analysts are just pay to play, you know, that you can pay an analyst firm and they will correspondingly write favorable things about you. The more you pay them, the more favorably that they will write about you. And the only analysts who will do that really are analysts that are not taken seriously by your clients. It definitely means AR is seen as a cost, not as a value creator. There's very little kind of value-based funding outcomes for analysts. Very hard for AR to go back to the business and say what it's done and then show that it should be getting more money. And that means that the ability of AR to be a driver of sales and marketing success is really limited. You know, we just may not be proven, AR may not be a proven catalyst for sales success. So we know why this should work. Yeah, we do have an idea of why this should work. It's going to work if we do everything that's in the AR process. Yeah, we really think if we're identifying the analysts, if we're speaking to them in the right way, if we're actually reaching out to all of them, the right ones, if we know what is going on, we stay on track, and if we're leveraging the relationship, then it really should be, it really should work. But actually, what we're faced with is like a really messy pair of challenges. And actually, a series of really difficult challenges, actually. Firstly, there's this tactical challenge. Yeah, there are lots of things happening, lots of moving pieces. Analyst relations is very rarely well put, is very rarely well set up to support sales enablement. Really, when I think of companies that are doing AR sales enablement well, they've got either headcount, people who are dedicated to making this work, or they have strong embedded processes that are embedded in sales and marketing software solutions that make things trackable. And that produces an amount of transparency and confidence in the organization. That means that it's possible to more easily convince sales stakeholders of the value of analyst relations. I think there's also a big challenge with just the understanding and vocabulary. I'm going to say more about this on the next slide, but I think very often we don't really understand what the difference is between sales enablement and sales engagement and sales success. I'm working with this on I'm working on this with a scholar at a business school in Paris. He said one of the things that Deva says, you have to think of sales enablement not just as being something that AR does, but something that the whole organization is doing. Yeah? AR is contributing towards sales enablement. Many people are contributing towards sales enablement. Sales enablement is everything that gets the client or the prospective client into the sales meeting. It's everything that helps with buying. Everything up to and including preliminary qualification. And then sales engagement, well, this is a real selling. Yeah? If you think of where, for example, pre-sales colleagues may stand. I've got a client that I'm working with. They've got a sales enablement team. When you look inside, when you open up the box, and you look at what is done in the sales enablement team, they're just pre-sales engineers, not just pre-sales engineers. They're fantastic pre-sales engineers. There are only pre-sales engineers in the sales enablement team. So sales enablement is everything that is helping you to get through to preliminary qualification, including buyer education. Sales engagement, that's the real thing. Success, obviously success is a really important part of what you can drive with a strong analyst relations program. So if you think about it, analyst relations contributes to sales enablement. It can contribute to sales engagement, like it can produce collateral that salespeople can use in handling objectives and shaping their value proposition, and also in customer success, in implementation, in maintenance, in growing the account. Analyst relations has a role there. So AR is not only impacting on sales at the enablement stage, it's engaging all the way through. This point about vocabulary matters because although there are these time bottlenecks, there are resource bottlenecks, there are problems of understanding. I think actually there are, like to get into a bit of jargon, there are like epistemological challenges as well. When you talk about sales enablement, analyst relations people and salespeople, they think those words mean different things. Yeah? So very often when we speak to sales professionals, they think of sales enablement as a technology, like there's sales enablement software. Yeah. Over the last 20 years, sales teams have found pieces of information, skills, tactics, proof points that are really useful for them to have. They've organized that knowledge into things that are basically learning management systems. And these learning management systems are now available as sales enablement solutions. They are technologies. They're used to onboard salespeople and to support pre-sales people. Structured content systems, just like courseware almost do. Yeah. So they think, so salespeople, many salespeople, they think of sales enablement as a foundational technology. That's something that is laying down foundations. It's done once, you dip into it, you go into it like you might refresh yourself looking at a marketing textbook or something. And actually, you look at what marketing communications professionals, including us analyst relations people do. No, we're not really thinking of it as that way. I'm sure I can't, I'm not going to say that everybody in analyst relations thinks in the same way. That's obviously untrue. It would be ridiculous. But as a rule of thumb, I think we are kind of stuck into some really old notions that have come across, silver bullets. So you thinking of looking at the flow of information coming out of analyst firms, you package this up into a little bullet, a silver bullet, that's the thing that kills vampires. You package it up into a bullet point that can be fired onto a slide, and then that bullet will kill your competitor in the sales meeting, in the pre-sales meeting. So we think of these silver bullets as like an ongoing fire of news that is coming out from the analyst relations team into the sales organization, like a dripping faucet. And then we're also linking that to what many people, I kind of think Gartner coined this phrase, I'm not sure, but you can help me, inbound AR. So the idea of listening to what analysts are saying and then writing down what analysts are saying and then putting that in a box and sending it over to the, you've got like the product management box that goes over to product management, and then the account management box that goes over there. It's a very different methodology. Yeah. a technology versus just a stream of unstructured files. It's problematic. And because of these two things, that for sales and that for the sales team, sales enablement is something that is easy to engage, it's highly structured, it's foundational. And then for the AR people, sales enablement is pushing analyst content. It's very punctual, not foundational. That produces some dislocations. And it means that when we think about analyst relations, very often I see and I even help companies to try to start these proof of concept projects to get sales enablement going. I worked on one at HP, for example, that followed a process very much like this. And if you think about it, a proof of concept, it kind of looks simple. You work out what the business needs. You look at what AR can do to satisfy AR, the AR requirement for supporting salespeople. You push that into your program. You measure whether you've done it or not, and then you see what happens. And one of the things that that David Taylor, an AR leader at Vodafone, said when I ran a webinar like this with him several years ago, is actually you only need one win to validate an analyst relations program. Imagine my client that had this one lead from a number 10, number 20 analyst firm, float all the way through the sales pipeline, and then it led to a $4.5 million lead. Well, I mean, their spend on analyst relations, isn't even 10% of that. I mean, that year it may not even have been, more than a few percent of that. If you have a lead that comes through, one lead is all it takes. But the challenge is, after the proof of concept, rolling out sales enablement programs is extremely challenging, because this activity of wrapping things up in a way that salespeople know how to deal with them, this is really hard. It's really hard for AR people if you don't understand the sales challenge, not just like the generic process of what selling is, but to understand right now what the problems are that salespeople have in the market. So when we're sending insights into the business, they're normally not sent in a form that is very useful for our sales colleagues, and they have to be adapted. They have to be translated for salespeople by people who are sales aware, and in practice that means people who have been salespeople for the client or are salespeople for the client. And the insight really needs to be actionable. And again, if the insights are going over, it needs to be presented to people usefully, and that means it has to be sent by people who know what those people mean. So if you're sending insights to product managers, it has to be written by somebody who knows some things about the product and the challenges that the product marketing team has. If it's being sent into sales, it has to be prepared by people who understand what the sales challenges are now. So you need actionable insight who have the relevant skills to be able to reshape these insights. If you just deliver these insights, it's like imagine if I'm trying to learn Spanish and somebody says, well, there's a library over there, you'll find books in there about Spanish. I mean, that's kind of useful. It's not really terribly useful though, is it? Like, I probably knew that there was a book about Spanish in the library, right? It's not very helpful if you just have a pile of content. And that is very often what Analyst Relations is creating. I can see there are several lovely questions that are coming in. So having outlined all of this bad news, I'm just gonna run through some questions and then talk about what we've learned. Somebody asks, the end result we want is to get more analyst mindshare, but we don't always get more analyst mindshare. Are there best practices that can be followed? Absolutely. We have some amazing webinars about analyst relations. They're on our YouTube channel. Go in and check those webinars out. Lots and lots of best practices about that. The other thing, the other things that I would pull out, for me, like the Bible for analyst relations is Ephraim Malek's book, win them over. There's a third edition of this book with a lovely introduction from Ludovic Laforestier from the Institute of Influencer and Analyst Relations. That is well worth a read. Yeah, that's a fantastic best practice guide. Another question: really hard to become for AR to become visible. Very hard to know who's influencing sales decisions, and very hard when the sales team can't access the reports. So let me try to break that down a little bit. Yeah. In a way, in the opposite order. Yeah, it can be very hard for sales to access analyst research. That's why we need to be rewriting and producing derivative content, as I've spoken about. That working up of bullet points, summaries, newsletters, derivative content. Yeah. That you have fair use on, where you don't need analyst permission. That is really important. So then the second thing is knowing which analysts impact sales, and for that, take a look at our webinar about prioritization. Most analyst relations effort is wasted because it's not being allocated to analysts who are really impacting your audience. It's not producing a marginal impact on analysts who are impacting your market. So look at the prioritization webinar for that. And then connecting to sales. I mean, there are some techniques that I'm going to talk about now, but the number one technique I would say to start off with is get into training of spokespeople. Be present in the spokespeople training. Later on, I'm going to talk about 6 things that analyst relations people can do. Yeah, I've still got time. 6 things that analyst relations people can do without burning a lot of the time of analyst relations professionals. How can we quantify AR initiatives? Well, there's 2 ways that you might want to quantify AR initiatives. One is like the kind of is measuring AR itself. So we did a webinar 3 weeks ago with my colleague Matt. So lots in there about measurement. Check out that webinar to find out lots of answers about quantification and measurement. Someone asked, is it feasible to define sale outcomes from the AR team? Well, most sales outcomes that AR influences, you won't be able to measure. But if you do have your CRM system set up for certain use cases that you can track, then you can do it. Yeah. So if you've got strong enough relationships that you can ask analysts for recommendations, or analysts will let you know about recommendations, you can note those in a CRM. If you are getting leads in from analyst content or derivative content from analysts, you can tag those. Your salespeople can ask prospects which analysts they use, and in your win-loss analysis, again, you can ask people which analysts they used through the sales purchase. All of that information can be put into your CRM. It can be tagged onto specific leads going through the pipeline, and then you can correlate all of these things on your pipeline. So you can show the impact of analyst relations. Not everywhere. Obviously, you can't like get a little analyst relations angel to stand on the shoulder of your Gartner analyst and eavesdrop on all of the calls, but you can do a lot. And if you were to do those things, I mean, almost nobody is doing all of those things. If you were to start to do all of those things, you would have made a big step, a big step forward. How do you keep track of all discussed points? Get a coach, get a mentor, work out some strategies that work for you. How to increase the visibility of AR? I think there are 2 sides to obtaining more visibility for AR. There's visibility inside the sales team, and definitely you can do that by just stop shooting these random bullets into the sales team. Yeah, speak to the sales team, understand the kind of problems that they have on a punctual basis. Try to support key accounts, major deals. Try to deliver insight that is specific to bottlenecks that the sales team is facing now. And then in a foundational way, build AR into the onboarding of salespeople so that they know that analysts exist, they know how to use them, they know how to access analyst comments? And then more broadly, how can you increase visibility of AR in the whole organization? Again, one is by packaging up these analyst insights and producing your own analysis and shifting that out into the organization. That brings me through delightfully onto my next slide. So one of the things that Gartner has done, Gartner's done many things to annoy people, right? Okay, so it's not like this is like, oh, Gartner did something that annoyed people. As one of the many things that Gartner has done to annoy people is this quote you see in the right-hand sidebar. 40% of analyst relations functions will be renamed to better represent the function's objectives, impact, and value to the business by 2025. And there was a webinar that I did back in November, hosted by the Analyst Observatory at the University of Edinburgh, where I discussed this with my colleague Robin Schaffer. And I think it's true that we are at a point where analyst relations has got the potential to massively transform its value, and where established AR stakeholders are fighting against that and don't really like it. Yeah. So analyst relations started off in the bottom left-hand corner, yeah, outbound AR, picking up what your company has to say, and you move that information across and leave it in the brain of the analyst. Yeah, that's very much like 1980s analyst relations. And then in the 1990s, we had this idea of inbound. Yeah, so AR plays a role in picking up analyst insights and moving them across and dropping them into the minds of the vendor. And this dyad, yeah, outbound and inbound, is like recognizably the best practice AR that for example, the IAAR advocates. That's the common sense. That's the 20th century common sense of analyst relations. And I don't think anyone has a better name for analyst relations at the moment. But I think what we are seeing is some elements in the way the relationship is changing and the way the insight is changing, where some things which definitely were the habits of one or two analyst relations people in the past, but are definitely not the dominant paradigm for analyst relations, where these attitudes that I call customer success and analyst success are growing. Yeah. So one of these is AR creating insights, not just picking up analyst comments and dropping them over, but AR thinking, looking at all of this information that only AR has, and AR developing its own intelligence, AR becoming a source of competitive intelligence and pushing this information out. And then also driving analyst success. Yeah, so trying to identify what can we do to help the analysts who matter to us to become more successful. If our positive analysts become better analysts and more able to work as thought leaders, then they will be better able to ensure that the market is making better choices, and that will make us more likely to be purchased. So this kind of transformation at a level of paradigm, this is where I think people have to be moving. There are some things, even in this 20th century best practice AR, hardly anybody can really say confidently they're operating at best practice across the board. But even at that level of 20th century best practice, there are some things that you can do. Yeah. Understand the growth plan. Understand what are the strategic priorities of the company. You can try to focus your very limited time on a small number of strategic objectives. You can get more buy-in. Yeah, go make sure that a wider number of stakeholders know what you're trying to do and they agree with you. You can start to build strong relationships with salespeople, even if they're not going to waste a lot of time, spend a lot of time with you, invest a lot of time with you. You can still try to build strong relationships with them in a whole series of ways using a wide range of influencing strategies. You can definitely ensure that there are clear policies. Yeah, one of the advantages of clear policies, of course, is that people produce less nonsense. Analysts produce less information that incorporates random and mistaken commentary from your colleagues. But it also means that there's somebody who has a better idea of where your organization is contacting with the analysts, and where analysts who, if they contact you, they might be advising a client. Right? So to know when there are touch points and whether these touch points might correlate with account management. And then definitely a foundational thing, get AR into your sales meetings, into your new hire training. That can have a really, really big impact. As I mentioned, our particular sweet spot we found is in this whole thing of leverage. Yeah. So both in paid and unpaid ways. Yeah. Developing these derivative resources. So either producing kind of licensed things or summarized things or infographics or LinkedIn posts. We're able to work with clients to understand the goals that they've got, understand where they want to target, and then create things, hooks, yeah, either hooks produced as part of a commercial relationship with the analyst or owned hooks that we've created ourselves. We wrap that around with the information needed to be able to amplify them, to push them out. And then something that AR can do with key accounts, something that we can do with our clients' key accounts, is really support sales and marketing by helping to respond to salespeople who need to know which analysts are most important in this niche, which analyst firms might be most influential on this deal. How can I get balancing information to correct this pain point, this criticism, this challenging interaction in a briefing? I wanted to mention 6 things that don't burn salespeople time. The number one problem I've seen with kickoff projects is that they burn a lot of time from salespeople, and that's just going to produce. It's not just going to do that. It stands a strong chance of building resentment. If you're taking time from salespeople before you're productive, before you're able to really show value, you're going to hamper your credibility. But there are some things that you can do. You can look to see how you can leverage analyst content and any content that has been developed by AR for sales education more widely. You can start to involve your analysts in sales education. I don't want to name drop, but for example, I ran a very successful event with Siemens where we brought in Peter O'Neill, the Forrester analyst, who is now at Research in Action, to speak to a group of, well, I don't know, like 20 or so sales and product managers, to help them to better understand, like, what is an analyst, what do they do, how can they help you, why are they not so scary? Bring in analysts for leadership events and to help with sales education. Definitely use analyst events as lead generators. Yeah, there's a huge difference I've seen between AR spending on analyst events or other spending on analyst events that is being used to generate leads and not generate leads. And really, I've seen like similar competitors be at an analyst event. One of them goes away with 300 leads and one of them goes away like 300 qualified leads, and the other one goes away with almost nothing. Yeah. You can start to use your insights to enrich the client relationship. Yeah, anything that salespeople can do to get an excuse to spend more time, more quality time in conversation with clients is going to help everybody. And then coordinate with customer advocacy. There's something very interesting happening with customer advocacy. I've seen a lot of people who started to build customer advocacy programs have failed and gotten frustrated, and they've gone into customer advocacy. So that means commissioning case studies, reference programs, encouraging reviews, customer listening programs, that kind of thing. All of this information can also help analyst relations and can help sales. And these, I think, are really easy, straightforward techniques that most people can adopt. Earlier on, I mentioned this thing about addressing hostile analysts or critical analyst opinions, as we more politely, it's not the analysts that are bad, it's just their opinions that are bad. You need a process for dealing with that. And you'll be able to support sales much more effectively if you had this, because very often, think of that SOS slide earlier on with the people from the lifeguard, from the lifeboats. You need to know what you're going to do. Salespeople need to know who to contact you. You need a process to respond quickly. An inventory of counterbalancing content really helps you. You need to be proactive when you see major critical research going out into the market. You need ways of equipping people. I'm a big fan of video. That really helps you. And then anything you can do to track your deals is going to help you to identify what are the characteristics, what analysts are overrepresented in deals that you're losing. Yeah. What analysts are overrepresented in analysts where you're getting critical pushback. If your organization gives you this kind of quantitative backing through the sales cycle, that this analyst impact is being recorded by salespeople and at the moment of lead generation, then you're able to do this. But it's not feasible, of course, for AR to be expected to have quantified outcomes if analyst impact is not being quantified in a systematic way in the work processes that are needed to capture that information. I want to finish off on a point about measurement. So we just did a webinar about measurement. If you're interested in measurement, check out the measurement webinar, because we do a lot with this. We support a lot of clients with this. There are a whole series of metrics that you can use, and many of them will be really hard to track because you're not doing them now. And some of them, your organization will be already tracking them. You may not know it, but they're already tracking them. Of course, use the ones that are already being tracked. Yeah, that is what is going to help you a lot. Okay, I'm almost out of time now. I'm gonna just take a peek at the Q&A. I can see there's some things in the chat as well. Most of the company sees AR as an investment center. Okay, that's good to be an investment, I think. Better to be an investment than a liability. Companies end up spending. How does an organization define the AR budget? Oh, well, that's definitely not a question for a webinar on sales, but I mean, that is a whole other conversation, isn't it? If you get from Alex's book, certainly it's in the first edition and in the second edition. I'm not sure if it's in the third edition. He's got a methodology for sizing the value of analyst relations. So if you can size the value of analyst relations, then that gives you an idea about budget. And there were some things on the chat as well. Can we get a recording for the meeting? Yeah, the webinar is being recorded. Pedro did mention that at the beginning. Webinar is being recorded, and then our colleague Andrea will send a note out to people who've registered to let them know how to get the recording. Whew, I felt like I spoke very fast. It's dead on the hour. We have no questions outstanding. Amazing. Didn't think we'd do it. Thank you so much for your questions and comments. If you've got more other different questions, comments, disagreements, you can email me, and we will speak to you very soon. Thank you so much for your time, people. And Pedro, thank you for introducing and looking after us all.
No, thank you, Duncan.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank
Hope
you.
Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.